I'm here with Lawrence Ballard, our nursery supervisor at Landscape Services. We're here in our East Campus nurseries, and we're looking at what to look for when selecting good nursery stock. So Lawrence, kind of what's the steps a homeowner should look for or go through in selecting nursery stock?
Well, I think the first most important step is to know what your plant is supposed to look like to begin with at the time of the year that you're looking at it, so you can tell if you're looking at something that is abnormal in some way. So if you start with that, that's a good first step. The next thing is checking the tag on the plant that you're looking at. That's going to give you some information to verify that this is what you want. Also, lots of times they'll give you some cultural information and that type of thing. Now once you've established that, then you want to start inspecting the plant. Inspect the top of the plant to begin with.
Okay, so we'd want to look at the plant. So like you're saying, so initially do a little bit of research. So the homeowner should know what they're looking for when they get there.
That's a good idea.
And that will help in making sure they're picking the right plant for the right site.
Right.
So then you say, so then we want to look at the top of the plant, so what we're looking for broken branches or anything like that, I suppose.
Right, something abnormal, something that might alert you that there may be a problem with the plant. Certainly you're going to look for the evidence of pests, diseases, weeds in the pot, something that would tell you that this is going to be an inferior quality plant. Okay. Now if you don't see any of that and everything looks good, the form looks fine, then you might want to consider, for example, with these two plants, one is heavily flowering, one isn't flowering. Right. And that's an important consideration, because when a plant's flowering, all of its energy is going into flower and fruit production.
Sure.
And when you take it out to the landscape, you might want that energy to go into root production and
right.
establishing in the landscape. So it could be an important consideration to possibly pick this plant over this one, even though this is a more attractive looking plant. If you did pick this one, you might want to consider letting it going through its flowering in the container, knocking those flowers off, and then planting it in the landscape so that it can focus on roots.
Okay. So then maybe the next step is talking to the nursery professional, seeing if we could pull the plant out of the pot and just seeing what the roots look like.
Sure, yeah, it doesn't hurt to do that. You might want to have a look at those roots and see what you're going to see. This one is very close to being what we would call pot bound. It's got a lot of roots down here at the base. They're very healthy looking roots. They're nice and white and healthy looking, so there's no problem with the plant health, but it really doesn't look like what we'd like to see. We'd like to see an even amount of roots all around the outside of the root ball without them all concentrated and circling around the base. We can fix that, but we'd prefer not to see that.
Sure. So we could prune that stuff off, and it's not
right.
slimy, so that would be a bad thing if there were slimy around
right.
or something like that. But ideally, we don't want to have to cut anything off of this plant when we're transplanting it anyway.
Sure.
So,
yeah,
okay.
Your highest quality plant is not going to have that.
So here's a real good example of what we were talking about earlier about what happens if you leave those circling roots.
Right. This was a plant that was in its container too long. The roots started circling. It grew in the landscape to this large size. It eventually declined. We had to dig it out. That's what's always going to happen with a tree like this. It doesn't recover. Ends up like that, a dead tree. So when we're selecting trees, we want to look for, if we're looking at a bald and burlap type of tree, we want to try and get away from the root issues. Now here we don't have the circling root problem that we might
right.
have in a container, but we could have other root issues.
So when we're looking at appropriate size root ball to stem, what are we looking for here? What kind of formula?
Just a general guideline. This varies with species, but if you have, for every inch in tree trunk diameter, you want to have a foot of root ball diameter.
Okay.
That's just a general guideline.
Okay, so that gets us off to a good start.
Right.
The other thing we want to look for is some sort of root flare, right?
Yeah, you want to see a taper down at the base of the tree so that you know that your main roots are coming out from the trunk within about an inch down underneath the root ball. If it's clear down in here, it's planted too deep.
Okay.
If you can't see it, it looks like it might be there, a good test is just to give the plant kind of the bend test. You push on it, the whole thing should rock, or the tree should bend a little bit. You should see no pivoting down in this point. And that gives you an indication that everything's right. You've got a good, healthy root system. That's about the best you can tell without actually seeing the root system.
Okay.
Now we can look at a tree over here
All right.
that's got the problem that we're talking about. And you give this the shake test, you can see that it's pivoting down here at the base. It's really loose in the root ball. The root ball doesn't move at all. The tree rocks back and forth. That gives you an indication there's probably some sort of a root defect in this plant that you want to get corrected. It could have been planted too deep, could have had some issue early on in production. You probably want to reject that tree. There's a great tree, this one you don't want.